graphic and like the descriptions of how people, I was like, this is
But at the
tough.
same time, you had Junior killing his girlfriend. Like there were
Ugh.
murders happening and stuff
Yeah,
was
that
getting
didn't
covered
that
up, and
yeah,
like
but that
there
was
was other
also
stuff
awful.
going on. Huh?
I said that was also awful. It was just all awful. Everything that was
Right.
happening was awful.
Have you finished Under the Dome yet?
Mhm. I
You finished
liked
it?
it. I liked it. I can't I again, I didn't like it as much as, for example, The Stand. But I liked it.
And I tell you what,
There was a lot that I was like, "Wait, what though?" There's a
I
little bit of that. A pinch
I
at the end, I
didn't
was
care
like,
for the
"Wait,
end.
hold on."
I
Yeah.
didn't care for the end. To me, the end felt like we were just like, let's just come up with, let's just end it. Like the end was silly to me.
Yeah.
But then when I was watching the TV, like the TV show, one of the things that drives me crazy about it is like we're in the second season of it. I think we kind of gave up on it at this point.
Mhm.
But like there's no discussion or concern at all at that point about like air quality, which is like such a major driving
Oh
plot
god, yeah.
point in the
Yeah.
book. Yeah, which and makes sense. Like that was like
Yeah.
when stuff started happening. Like before the book got there, my brain's like, well, if air can't get out, what's going to happen to all the pollution? And
Right.
like until
Right.
it made sense,
What if there's a fire? What if there's a this? What if there yeah.
right? And in the movie, first of all, the dome is they can't hear through it. Nothing,
Oh.
water doesn't come through it. It's like so there's
Oh.
like all these scenes where there's
So it
like
should be even more of a problem, but they're
right.
not.
Yeah, they're like people on the other side, and it's like completely silent. They can't talk through it like they could in the book, and it's completely impermeable. Yeah, so there's all this like everything's fucked up
Oh,
with the show.
no.
However,
Yeah.
what I did is I switched over and started on, if I remember correctly, was your recommendation. I started watching. We started watching the Mr. Mercedes
Yeah.
show, and you liked that.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I thought there was great acting, and it's also very grim. It's very grim, but I
Well, it's a
liked it.
grim story.
Yeah.
But we're 4 or 5 episodes into that, and I'm enjoying it so far. Because so
Yeah.
far, like, there's a little bit like the Ida character wasn't in the book,
Which one's Ida?
the neighbor lady.
Oh, yeah. I
Um,
love that actress so much,
yeah,
and I
what's her
always
name? She
forget
was
her
in Two and
name.
a Half Men.
No,
I
no,
forget it
no.
too.
I love
Jim.
her. I love her. It's an unusual name, that's why. It's like Harper Holden or something. It's like 2
Yeah.
last names. I love
Um,
her.
but so
Fuck.
far, like
I hate
everything
that
seems to
I
be like
can't.
tracking with the book, like Brady's relationship with his mom. Like there was one kind of weird scene, and I was like, I'm like, worse
No,
than
that
that in the book, because in the book there's a thing that happened, and then like the
yeah,
next scene, I'm like,
they
that's
did
the
it.
thing
I
that
know.
happened. Yeah.
Isn't Kelly Lynch so good? She's
Yes.
so, so good in that.
Hmm.
And my friend Brita is the character, the girl that he works with, the gay character that he works with. I think
Uh-huh.
she's gay.
I just do.
That he works with at the store. She's like this awkward, tall,
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
yeah. She does such a great job in it.
So
Um,
I'm enjoying that one so far. I'm looking forward to where that we did finish Your Honor. Also finally after years of
Holland Taylor. Thank you, Jen. I love Holland Taylor. I hate that I couldn't think of her name. But when I said Harper Holden or whatever,
I wasn't
wasn't that far off.
I was gonna
I
say
was, but I wasn't.
it wasn't far off, but it also wasn't close. You know what
It
I
wasn't close.
mean?
Everyone can understand how I was that far off.
Right. Let me
Yeah.
look real quick and see what time. Sorry. For those of you just joining the live stream, I have a plumbing issue in the house, and I'm going to have to step out for just a minute at some point real soon.
I didn't have to type all the questions.
Oh, you're able to copy? Did you open them in Pages?
No, because there's no Pages on here. I opened them in text edit.
Oh, well, there you go.
Because Pages is not here either.
But yeah, so far I'm really. But what hasn't happened yet in Mr. Mercedes is we haven't met Holly yet. Like I'm desperate to see who's playing Holly and how
I
she's
love the
portrayed.
actress that plays Holly. Did you watch Succession?
No.
Okay. I love this actress. I think she does such a nice job.
Juliana, no, a plumbing issue is not taking the new taking a meeting. There's a literal
oh no,
plumbing
Juliana,
issue in
what
the
a
house.
Horrible thing. Yes, it's very reasonable for you to think that, and thankfully that is not the case.
From now on,
no,
there'll be a plumbing
no,
issue.
no.
I gotta go take care of a plumbing issue.
Yeah.
Oh no, 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 no.
Oh, I want to get this thing started, but I know that they said 20 minutes, and that was 23 minutes ago. They could already be here. Becky's ignoring my. Give me just a minute.
I'm reading about Tether.
Oh,
I got all the questions.
Oh, good. What are Are we talking? We're not talking about that on the follow-up, so, right? Tell me now.
Well, I think we might talk about that on the
Oh,
follow-up.
really? Oh, okay.
I don't.
Because I'm just telling you, if you want to bring another situation into this, we have so many questions
No, that
that
has nothing to do
going
with.
off on a tangent,
No,
it might be bad.
okay, I'll write it down. There is multiple. So the problem is we're gonna have to figure out. There's a tether issue in this case.
Oh, well, we're
Um,
not even close to there yet.
Yeah, well, I think that's coming this week, but I think that's why he wanted me to find.
Oh,
But there's different types of tether, and that's gonna be the
interesting.
issue.
Okay,
So
gotcha. Um, Jen says she's been on an older, only mildly scary movie kick. I could get on board for that for sure.
I can't do scary movies. I get nightmares.
Do you?
Oh yeah, like scary movies actually don't bother me. Like to actually watch them, it's like
But
my
then your
nightmares
brain is
get
like,
me.
I can
Yeah,
work with this in your
yeah,
dreams. Yeah.
yeah, and then I'm fucked from there.
God,
I
I
used to
used to
have
have
a
so many nightmares. I used to have so many nightmares. Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't know I was. But I used to have when I was little. I hadn't, of course, seen anything from A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I would have these horrible, horrible nightmares about Freddy Krueger. So
Mhm.
then, like when I finally got old enough and watched the movie, I was like, oh, this is fine. My nightmares were way worse than this.
Yeah, nightmares
Anyway,
all
go
the
ahead.
time. We used to live in
Did
a
you see Amy's message while I was gone?
Amy's message. I think.
She said she sent you a message on Instagram.
Nope. I have to look. I used to have nightmares, the same nightmare over and over and over again about the way our old house used to be set up is there was a closet like at the foot of our bed. Our room was small, so you can only set it up like one way. And the closet lined up with like where my feet were. And it was like no door
Uh-oh.
on the closet, just an open closet. And I had like reoccurring nightmare of getting sucked into that closet, like feet first.
I
Yeah.
never have like when I have bad dreams, they're real
That's
enough
like
that
Poltergeist.
they scare the shit out of me.
Doesn't that happen in Poltergeist? Isn't that what happens to Carol Ann? She gets
Maybe.
sucked in. Yeah, the
Maybe. I
closet's
don't know.
the
I don't know.
closet's the source, man.
I don't know. I've never seen that movie. Like
Poltergeist, I
yeah.
have. Yeah, closets are bad. But yeah,
Oh, look who turned up. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Hey, we were talking
3,
about
4
you.
better lock
Yeah.
the door.
We were discussing you in the Patreon without discussing you.
Yeah, without mentioning
No names were named.
no names were named.
Except for just now when I made it completely obvious.
But those beds are, if it seems like we're stalling because I'm trying to
I see. Well, maybe I gotta check on a plumbing issue. Hang on.
like of course somehow I know that again if you're just so there's a clog in the
Here's what I got today, guys.
the blue flavored. How is the blue raspberry?
It's blue. Tastes like blue.
The First Form Energy Orange Sunrise it's delicious, but dude, the citrus lime.
Yeah.
Mm,
See, here's the thing though.
mm.
I like blue. I like
You
blue
like blue?
raspberry.
Yeah.
I like, and truthfully, to tell anybody what it tastes like, if you have any blue drink,
It
that's
tastes
what
like
it tastes
blue.
like. It tastes like blue.
Yeah.
And it's delicious if you like blue. If you don't like blue, you're not gonna like it.
Mhm.
I had we can do this later if you want to talk about it, but I had a First Form bar on the way here. It's delicious. Tides me
Excellent.
over, so I'm not hangry.
Which one did you have?
The chocolate chip cookie dough. That's the
See
one.
that's okay. Like they're all good,
Mhm. That's the one for me.
but the chocolate peanut butter pretzel is like the best candy bar I've ever had. But
Yeah,
it's
no,
a protein bar.
That's how I like this one. Is like this chocolate chip cookie dough one is like a candy bar, but it's not. It seems like it though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, when we were talking about nightmares, there's like I never have like crazy like supernatural weird night. Like my nightmares are always like something very real happened, and then it happened to me last week. It was like right before I went to bed. I saw like on Facebook there was a fatal accident down here bike in front of Hackers.
Mhm.
And like the last thing I saw was people were like, does anybody know anything about it? And they're like, I don't know, it was a black SUV or whatever. And I was like going to bed, and I remember thinking like, shit, because Erica drives a black SUV, and she does, and it was like whatever. It was like must have been Wednesday because it was the day she doesn't work, so I hadn't seen her or whatever. And it was, and so like I went to bed thinking, I'm like, well, surely somebody would. It wouldn't have been. Why she wouldn't be out at 11 o'clock at night? Everything. But went to bed with that in my head enough that then had a dream that it was her.
Yeah.
And then like I had gone to the hospital. I was there with her parents, and there was like all this stuff. And then like woke up in the morning, like freaked out that it happened. And then, but it did stop myself because I was gonna like, I was gonna be like the dad text, like, "Are you okay? Just needed to make sure you're alive. Everything's fine." But then I was like,
Yeah.
someone would call me. But I had that half hour of that didn't really happen, right? Like I would know
Yeah.
if that happened.
Oof.
Just
Also,
Better
I
shut
drive a
that
black
off.
SUV, and he didn't think about me.
what the
in-
fuck would
in
you be doing down here?
slightest.
Okay, my plumbing issue is now occurring, so I'll be right back.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh, didn't think about me in the slightest. No big deal. I just drive the fucking black SUV, and he's worried about her. Doesn't worry about me in the slightest. It's like, fuck that guy. That guy dead.
Uh,
JV, you really need to go watch The Bear on Hulu. I know.
You
we
know what? You
started
caught us at a good time because we're ready to start a new thing. So we'll just go ahead and do
I know
it.
that's what we're doing that right now. We're actually stuck between things, so we're watching The Bear again because it's just so good.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
It's so
I'll deal with the stressful stuff and I'll just do it.
it's so stressful, but it's so worth it. So
Okay.
worth it. You'll love it, maybe, or you'll hate it. Either way.
Uh-huh. I mean,
Either
I
way.
know I'm not gonna hate it. I definitely know I'm not gonna hate it. I just
Truthfully,
I
like
just
I'm
know
not
I'm
a
gonna have to
big
deal with the
like
stress.
I'm an idiot and I don't know a lot about a lot, but it's beautifully shot. Like I love it. I love
Yeah.
the chaos. I love how in the moments of non-chaos, how beautiful the episodes are and like the
Yeah.
way they film it. Especially when they get to making like season 2 and season 3, when they get to really making dishes, like the
Mhm.
way they shoot them
Yeah.
is you just want
That's
to eat
great.
the whole time. It's
It usually
beautiful.
wins all the prizes. So
Yeah,
I mean, I know it's great.
what is it? People are saying The Bear is the best. So good. Only one
Yeah.
episode I can't rewatch. Jen, is the episode you can't rewatch the Christmas episode? Because that one's rough. In the
Mm,
chat says she can't rewatch an episode, so I'm guessing it's that one because that one is season 2 is rough, but the rest of the season's great. Great. Who said The Bear was a comedy? The Bear is not a comedy. I never said it was a comedy.
sorry, I'm just answering a text now.
You're fine. I'm just confused as why people are saying The Bear was a comedy. Because there's a couple people that say it was categorized as a comedy. I don't see that. It's got some funny spots. It's got some comedy in it, but it's definitely not a comedy. It's drama all the way.
Yeah, that's what I think. Television's an interesting phase right now, where I think a lot of the time, like when I see the Emmy nominations, come through, and I'm in the Academy, and I see like the categories before the public sees them.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, that's tough. Like, you're really gonna put that in comedy, and like, and then same with other stuff where like I'm like, you're gonna put that in drama, but it's so funny.
Yeah.
It kind of should be it's almost like you need 3 categories, like dramedy or whatever,
A
because
dramedy.
there's so much that's hybrid now that is what's making so much of television really good. I mean, there's still plenty of garbage, but there's such good stuff getting made that it feels like, oh man, that's not fair that thing would go up against that thing, and like there can only be, 4 final nominees or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. What was
Yeah, comedy.
Platonic listed as?
That's a comedy.
I see, and I could see that as a comedy.
Yeah.
It's still got like the drama in there, but that's definitely like it was sillier. Like the whole intent was to
Yeah.
be silly. We're like,
Yeah.
this is not The Bear is not silly at all. Like there's
No.
some silly, like there's one character that's silly, but that's
Yeah.
him.
I think also it's like, it's kind of dumb. It's like, I kind of think it might be, and I don't quote me on this because I would
I'm
have to
doing
like
it.
check my work,
100%
but
quoting you.
okay, good. I feel like it's literally as simple as like, is it 30 minutes or is it 52 minutes? If it's 52 minutes, no matter what the content is, it's a drama. Like, I
Oh,
think because the Bear is 30 minutes, right?
the episodes change length, but most of them
Oh,
are
they do.
like right around
Okay.
in that 30-minute.
Yeah.
They have a couple like per season that are longer. They're like in that 42, 44
Okay.
minute bracket,
Okay.
but
Interesting.
so I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that happens sometimes.
That's weird. Why is is there a
It's the
reason
same
for
with
that?
Reservation Dogs. Reservation Dogs is like it's a very funny, and there's weird stuff that happens, but it's also very emotional and very sad, and it never freaking even makes it into the nominations, which is criminal. But I think that's part of it, is like it's just not. But then the Bear does, so I can't explain that. Never mind.
You're like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't watch enough TV. Like I just get on things like this Like I try. I watch a lot of Sports Center, and then I end up watching like something that Michelle wants to watch, and I get sucked super into it before
Yeah.
I know it. Like The Bear. Like we started watching it because of that, and then now I'm watching it again because I can't help myself. But I did the same thing with everything. Like Schitt's Creek. Watched Schitt's Creek like 3 times now because
Yeah.
Michelle liked it, and now
Yeah.
it's over.
And that is more of a feel goody kind of
That is a feel good. Like that's
I mean, I know it gets, yeah.
it's heavier, but it's still like that's a comedy. That's a sitcom.
Yeah, definitely a comedy. Definitely a comedy. Boy, he really is.
No,
It's
he really had to
nine.
go all the way down.
It's really 920, and he's really dealing with a Roto-Rooter guy.
Yeah, no, he's
Crowd,
going for it.
we love you. Thanks for hanging in there.
He does.
Who's still following Karen Reed, even though it's over? It's still stuff is still rolling out. People are still talking about it. There's still like people, you know, I found when I listened to this recording again, I heard blah blah blah. There's still a lot of chatter going on about it, and I'm there for it.
I don't know anything. I
still
still don't know
interesting.
anything about it. I still don't know anything about it. Like what?
Mistrial. And then there was like a lot of drama around like this sort of, I guess, false narrative that was pushed out into social media about what the balance of the jurors was, of like what they thought. You know, they were like, it was 10-2, 8 you know, or whatever, 12, you know, 10 people. I can do math, especially when I just say the actual numbers right before I screw it up. But like almost everyone knew that she was a murderer, but like only a couple people were holding out. And then it like came out that that wasn't the case at all. That it was much more complicated than that. And like at least half of the people thought that she was completely innocent. Anyway, it's very interesting.
That's so crazy. I don't.
Oh, Susan. Yeah. The Alec Baldwin thing. I can't watch that. I'm already, it's very frustrating. I have a lot of thoughts about that show, about what happened on Rust, and about how New Mexico has handled this, and about what's appropriate. But from the very beginning, and I have friends on 30, like who are on 30 Rock, like who are close to Alec. But from the very beginning, having worked on a show with blanks and with weapons and with those rules being like drilled down, I was appalled when I heard what happened. And my first thought was like, he's responsible for this as the producer, not as the actor. But like, I was like, he's responsible for her life. Like he is responsible.
Yeah.
I know it was an accident, and I know he didn't think the gun was loaded, but the problem is that trying to explain like the whole way the Hollywood union shit runs and all of that stuff is very convoluted. So like how they've charged him versus like where I feel his responsibility lies. Like now they're trying to bring in his responsibility as a producer, but they didn't charge him in that way. So judge in the prelims was like, no, you're not bringing any of that in. And I was like, well, then you shouldn't be charging him at all, because as an actor, I don't think he is responsible at all.
I don't know how the handling of it goes like on a set, but from a gun guy's perspective, coming from the gun world, like shot a lot, it's so tragic that it went down the way that it went down. It should not have happened at all.
It's terrible. But when anytime you have a weapon on set, when I worked with guns, we had to, and the prosecutor is trying to explain this to the judge, and then all of that just got thrown out. You have to, every time there's a gun on the set, in front of the entire crew, you show there's no rounds in the gun. You show there's nothing in the chamber. The actor sees it before they take it.
Yeah.
The first assistant director is the person doing that, which is why he pled guilty, because he knew he was guilty, because that should have happened. And the producer or the director, like the person who's like who's ultimately the most responsible on the set, whoever is the highest rank, needs to make sure that happens. And as the actor, he didn't care. And as the producer, he didn't care. And that's why people have been quitting on that set.
Oof.
So I think it's really bad. And I don't want a fellow actor to go to prison, but like, they did not do right. They did not do right by her, or, that was extremely unprofessional and very careless.
Well, there's precautions put in place for a reason. And if you're just bypassing those, it's not good.
I assume we're talking about the Alec Baldwin trial, but we should probably start our podcast.
Yeah. Oh, really? Should we start?
Now you're ready?
Thanks for joining us. Should we go ahead and start now?
Turns out it's a sump pump issue, seems like. If anybody was wondering. Yeah. Because luckily I was telling the guy when he came in, I was like, I don't understand why like how this works, because the toilet is on the floor and the where the plumbing goes out to the septic tank is this high. So I don't know how that happens. And then he's like, oh, well, there's got to be a sump pump somewhere, or like a injection pump. And we went around the corner, like, oh, look at that. No shit. And he's like, there's your problem. So anyway, all right. We're going to end this pregame recording. Pre-gamers, we love you guys. Thank you. See you next week or whatever.
Thanks for gamers.
Thanks, guys, for hanging out with me and Janet.
Truth and justice.
Yeah. And rolling.
I hit record. Rolling. Also rolling.
1, 2, 3.
Ahoy, friends. Thank you for tuning in to Truth and Justice. You are listening to the Friday Follow-Up for Season 15, Episode 2, Mario. This week we heard Bob break down DeMario's victimology. We learned about an armed robbery attempt that the police believe ultimately was the catalyst in DeMario's tragic murder. And we wrapped up this episode with Bob sharing his correspondence with Benton Harbor Public Safety Director Dan McGinnis. Questions and theories are pouring in, and Bob, Janet, and I are here to discuss it all.
All right. Hey, everybody. This case is developing quickly. It's getting fascinating, and I'm getting angrier and angrier the further I get into it. I'm really all I want to talk about is the episode that you guys are going to get on Sunday. But we're not going to do that. We're going to wait until then. I will tell you this: you're going to hear from Jody finally on Sunday. You're going to hear directly from them.
Awesome.
A whole series of interviews. Sunday's episode is all about Jody's alibi. So we'll get into that then. But for now, I know we got a bunch of questions, and I haven't really talked to either one of you two about this week's episode. What do you guys think?
I loved it. It was really great to start back where you talk about victimology and you break down the idea of victimology. I think that was helpful for me and everybody to say, like, we're not blaming a victim here. We're showing you this is, in the beginning, you gave an example of one body that could have multiple leads based on victimology. And I think that was really interesting. And I think that was a really good thing for all of us to kind of put our head back together on, because victimology is where all of this should start in every case. And it doesn't seem to be that way all the time.
Yeah, and certainly doesn't appear to be at all in this case. It was interesting when we were writing that part, because we were talking about in the pregame that we're kind of transitioning to Erica helping write the episodes as opposed to like just kind of consulting, giving input on it. And it was a little tricky because her first experience in one of our scripts was episode 1, and then episode 2 she kind of was writing her segment in that kind of sound, like, oh wait, we're teaching and breaking stuff down. It's different than when I should have told you that before we started doing it. But yeah, it was good for me to kind of remind myself of what victimology was. And that's a lot of what you guys hear in all of these episodes is, what am I thinking when I'm trying to figure stuff out and when I'm trying to figure out and investigate the case? And in that case, I was like, well, how do I explain victimology without making people think that we're like blaming a victim? So yeah, I appreciate that, because I thought that was a good example.
No, absolutely. I actually have a list of questions here, but I think I can fit them in with listener questions, so we can move on from there. Janet.
Cool. Well, it's funny you would say that, Zach. Yeah, because I was also going to mention the victimology thing. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the sort of, not to put it too lightly, but one of the sort of games I play with myself when I'm listening to a new episode is, who's going to ask about this? Who's going to ask about that? So how many people are going to wonder this? Because when you're at the early stages of an investigation like this, and our listeners being who they are, any little breadcrumb that gets dropped in one of the foundational episodes as we're just getting started just raises so many more questions than it can answer yet. And so this was definitely, it was not disappointed when I went to Facebook to look at that follow-up post, because everything I had made a note about, sure enough, somebody had definitely already gotten there first, if not multiple people. And, there's a lot of questions, of course, about Jody's alibi and some of those strings that are getting pulled. So we'll probably eschew answering those today, because I know you're going to be getting into it. But people are fired up, a lot of questions. And by the way, just a note that if you're listening to this episode on Friday, or, like right after it drops, you also know that you've had the opportunity to listen to the re-release of the interview that you did with former police officer in Benton Harbor, Andrew, who had a very interesting story to tell. I'm sure for some people, it probably was the first time they heard that interview. So that adds even more context. So I don't know if people have questions about that and haven't had a chance to listen to it, since we're recording this a couple of days. We're basically recording this right after you re-release that episode. Should we invite people to, because I think there are going to be some things that come up when people listen to that re-release that may tie into this week or next week's follow-up. So maybe people can, if you have thoughts on that, you can drop it in for next week.
Yeah, that'll work. I think, give everybody a chance to listen to that re-release. And also I do want to point out that it was Janet's idea for me to re-release it as a bonus. She very gently pointed out to me my little intro in that, where I said that
it doesn't
I
matter.
decided to put it out. For those of you that are listening, you know that was Janet's idea. And that's just the first part of my 3-part apology.
It's totally fine. I just will say, I was listening to it this morning because I was so excited that it dropped right before we were going to record this. I was like, oh, I've been wanting to re-listen to this, and I'm so glad it's back in the feed. And so I listened to it, and Brandon just heard me say, because I had it in my earbuds as I was putting makeup on for our record today, he heard me go, "You jerk, I was the one who suggested that." And Brandon just walks in and goes, "Uh-oh."
Again, my apologies.
Anyway. It doesn't matter.
Janet's idea.
But super helpful, because listen, I had forgotten to do it. Remember, I was so fired up to listen to it, and then I forgot. So I'm so glad it showed up in the feed. So really, I just needed that reminder, that poke to listen to it again. But it really sets very interesting context, again, for what happens. And, Andrew also says, and again, we can move past this because I know most people won't have had a chance to listen to it in the chat and so forth, but he talks about it being an impoverished community. And he also talks about being a semi-impoverished police force in terms of like what their funding was and how that also influenced decisions that people make in those environments. Like it's fascinating.
Well, and there's a lot going on in Benton Harbor, and I don't know if there's any questions of this follow-up, but there's been posts about it, and it's stuff that we're going to get into later, partially because I need to get a better grasp on it too. Like there was years back, there was our governor had enacted some kind of law where basically the state can come in and like take over a community, and that happened in Benton Harbor. They put an emergency manager from the state came in and basically made it so that the city council and the mayor and those people couldn't do anything. Like they were allowed to call a meeting to order and adjourn it, and that was it. And everything else was done by this emergency manager. That, by the way, is, how do I put this carefully? That is when the former public safety director was booted out, and Dan McGinnis was put into the position of public safety director by what I was told was his frat brother, who was the emergency manager that came in and was handling the city of Benton Harbor. There's also a new initiative that they've been putting out to try to make Benton Harbor better. There's like this 200-page document they just put together. I haven't read it yet. So there's been lots of different effort from at the state level to try to do something about the situation in the city of Benton Harbor. And obviously none of it seems to have worked to this point. So just know that like we're aware of that stuff and we're like researching it, but I'm not going to do an episode and break it down until I fully understand what the situation is.
Got it. Well, we have, as you can imagine, tons and tons of questions. There may be things, once again, that, I broach that you're like, put a pin in that. But, certainly I would say just starting with, it's almost like working backwards in a way, but, when we find out in this last episode that there is an investigation unit of some kind that, as you hear it from McGinnis, there is now activity happening outside, investigation happening outside of what your work has been. Lots of questions around that. And I don't know how deeply you want to get into that, but obviously people are wondering how that's going to affect us and whether or not can be verified that that's happening, etc.
I'm working on that, and one of our listeners found a court document that was really interesting and posted. The Attorney General Conviction Integrity Unit has been looking into this case since last May. There was, but see, this is what was confusing me about McGinnis saying that he sent it to the Conviction Integrity. That's why I have lawyers looking at this for me, trying to figure this out, because I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of a police agency sending it to the Attorney General's office. Generally, it is, like a defense organization alongside with a prosecutor, like at the court level that's doing that. So I thought that was weird. Well, as it turns out, it's being looked at the court level. They found a document. It was an order from the Attorney General's office to Berrien County from last year, asking them to turn over a bunch of document trial transcripts and stuff because they were reviewing the case. So it's interesting that he's saying that he made this happen when now we know the CIU was already looking at this case a year ago. For sure, we know it's in some capacity they were already looking at it. I had called last week the Attorney General's office, Conviction Integrity Unit, and left a voicemail, and I haven't heard back from them yet, asking them to call me back. Of course, it was a holiday week, so that, I don't know.
Right.
It's tough to get a hold of anybody, but I want to talk to, I want to confirm where they're at in this process. And also I have stuff you guys haven't heard yet. I have evidence that they don't have that I need to get into the hands. Was the intention this season for me was, as we build up this case file, is then to go back to the Innocence Project, the Cooley Innocence Project at Western Michigan University, who had looked into this case a while back, and get them involved again. And now here's the new evidence. Here's what you need to actually file a writ to get this conviction overturned. And then they would hopefully get with the conviction integrity. But now it's like there's this weird, like, the conviction integrity unit's already involved. But what I want to make sure, if that's the case, and if someone is actively investigating, not just reviewing trial transcripts, that here's new evidence, here are new affidavits, here's new stuff that you need to fully understand what's going on in this case.
What's bonkers to me, though, is the fact that in February and in March and in May, they told you they couldn't find the files.
Right. I was just about to say that. Like, wait, that's not a great look.
Yeah.
I mean, because if that's not the case, then now you can never take that seriously ever again when anyone says we can't find it, which we already sort of had questions about.
This is such a muddled mess, because what the Attorney General's office was asking for in that document that our listener, and I apologize to the listener, I should have pulled their name so I could share that, who the name was that found this. Joanne, possibly. Zach's looking for it. But anyway, that was the Attorney General's office writing to the court. So they wouldn't be looking for the police file. They're looking for the DA's file. I have the DA's office has produced to me their file, what they have. They gave me half of it a couple weeks ago, and I just got an email yesterday that the other half is now ready to go for me. And I already had the trial transcript. So that's what they were asking for from them. I always want the original police file, but also it was part of the issue was there's no trial exhibits, there's no photographs, there's no recordings, there's no nothing. None of the trial exhibits are at the prosecutor's office. Erica and I went to the prosecutor's office and verified, and they were like, well, we went through, there's all these exhibits. We don't have them because our policy is and they confirmed we turned all that stuff back over to the original investigating agency. They have it, which would be the police department. And then the police department saying, oh, the file shredded, we don't have it. So as far as like what's going on with the Attorney General's office, that was Joni Terse, that, by the way, that found that. So great job, Joni. What they were looking for with that had nothing to do with the police department. But it is also interesting now that in February, this whole saga trying to get the files from Benton Harbor Public Safety, we're just happy to give you whatever you want. This is all we have. Oh, but now the Attorney General's office is looking to do it. It's open. You can't have it. And then we find out, wait a minute, the Attorney General's office was looking at it since last May. And you could turn it over. Like, nothing makes sense here. Nothing at all makes sense here. So, and I don't know. I tried calling yesterday the Attorney General's office, and I got a recorded that they hung up on me. I got not a human being, but a recording said, we're experiencing higher than usual call volume. try again later. Click. And I was like, there's no
The old
message, no
try again
nothing.
later. Yeah.
Okay.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, Susan says, is it possible that these files that supposedly weren't found, maybe weren't found because they were already with the CIU? Um, God, I don't know. What a mystery.
No, not at least not from what McGinnis has said to me.
Mm.
That the police files had not been turned. From what that email said, after they found the files, then he sent those files, a copy of those files, to the conviction integrity unit.
Okay.
And I mean, good on him, because it needs to be done. It needs to be reviewed. But also, if all that's true, like I said in the episode, like how do I want to say this? I know how I want to say it, but I'm not going to say it like that. Yeah, that was probably a mistake. If his intention was, by me doing this, I'm proving to you that there was no corruption involved in this case at all. It just really opened a door that's going to be, that's a good thing. It is going to expose what's really going on, and you guys will hear. I'm trying to be so careful. You guys will hear on Sunday and next Sunday why that was probably a mistake, if the intention there was to prove that, how did he put it, that this is where I look the most foolish by accusing him of, which I didn't do, by the way, of being corrupt. What I said in my email, if you were listening, was I don't think that the person who is being accused of corruption, not by me, by the people involved, are accusing him of corruption. But when he said, that me accusing him of corruption, I look so foolish because he sent this stuff to the Attorney General's office. Well, we'll see. We'll see who looks foolish at the end of it.
By the way, Crystal had posted, I just realized that this might be the same CIU involved in Jeff Titus's case, which was an undisclosed case. So Crystal thought, I wonder if, Robbie or Susan might have some contacts that might be helpful, if you can end up connecting with them.
Oh, good question. I was actually, Susan's on my list. I just thought yesterday that I was going to reach out to her and see if she can help me kind of navigate some of this, because she's dealt with a lot of these issues before. So I didn't so if they dealt with Jeff Titus too, Susan was involved in that. So I was going to reach out to Susan and see if she can help figure this stuff out.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. So just a couple of clarification pieces. Again, Logan says, I just have a question about your uses of the word open towards the end of the episode. You talk about the case being open when you submitted your FOIA request, and then also say the case is being reviewed doesn't mean it's open. Clarification, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what exactly Logan's talking about as far as what I said there, but the point I was making in the episode is McGinnis is claiming the case is now open and therefore is not subject to FOIA. I don't think that is the case. I don't think the CIU reviewing a conviction deems it open for those terms. It's open for me. I'm investigating as an open case, but officially on the books, this is a closed case.
Yeah.
An arrest was made, a conviction was obtained, the person's in prison. There's no open motions before the court. There's no appeals going on. Nothing about this case is open. There's just supposedly the conviction integrity unit is reviewing it right now.
Truthfully, I caught that too. I think it was just a misspeak. I think you just had a misspeak in there.
Okay.
On the episode. Truthfully, I think that's all it was.
It could be, because I don't remember
how
I
because I did hear you say that something about it being open, but I knew in the context it's not, and I knew what you were trying to say. So I think it was just
must have been.
Yeah. Okay. Brendan says, I recall a legal ruling that if evidence was found missing or having been destroyed post-conviction, that this could be viewed by the court as exculpatory by default for the defendant in appellate proceedings. Would this apply here?
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. I believe the ruling you're talking about is the Youngblood Supreme Court ruling. I want to say it's something out of Arizona. It came up in, I think, Kenny Snow's case. And I believe the ruling had to do with like DNA testing, where the state in that case, in the Youngblood case, it was something to the extent of the state was required to maintain biological evidence so that it could be tested. The convicted person, Youngblood, wanted to do DNA testing to prove their innocence, And then the state claimed they had destroyed that evidence. They didn't have it, which was a violation of the evidence retention laws, the biological evidence retention laws. And then the Supreme Court ruled, Zach's looking it up, so you can tell me a minute if I'm completely wrong about this. But the Supreme Court ruled that because the state was required to keep it, and the defendant wanted to do the testing, and now they couldn't because they had violated the law and destroyed it, then they found that it will be assumed in court then that they were favorable results in the testing, something like that.
Yeah, they used the word bad faith, but it was Arizona versus Youngblood.
Good work, Bob.
Wow.
Nice pull.
Yeah. Nailed it. So yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how that would apply here. The tricky part here is there's two elements, and there is with every case. There's two elements here. There is, what information do we have to prove practically and factually that Jody Hill is in fact innocent of this crime, for us to understand whether or not they were involved? Can easily prove. I'm telling you right now, I can easily prove that Jody Hill had nothing to do with this murder. Easily. But then there is the matter of what can be done in court. So there are things where it's like, yeah, this is clearly evident of actual innocence, but this issue was already presented in court. The jury already heard it, and therefore it's not new evidence, and therefore you can't use it.
Right.
And so you're trying to find, like, is there something that where the defense attorney didn't do a good job
Ineffective,
on, ineffective assistance of counsel, or is it something that was withheld from the defense, where it's a Brady violation? Like, why didn't these things come? And there's a lot of this around the timing of this issue. And that's where lawyers, not me, real lawyers, are going to have to get involved and figure out how to handle that for actual innocence. I also believe that I have enough evidence to overturn the conviction on constitutional issues, the due process violations, with actual new evidence that has come forward through the investigation that I've been doing. So there's a lot of balls in the air right now with this case. This is crazy to me. We talked a little about last week, where somebody's like, well, why are you saying they're already innocent when we're starting? Things are moving really fast here. As it turns out, in this community, when you have a police department that doesn't seem to give a shit if they convict the right people for a murder, if you just go knock on a couple of doors and ask some questions and actually bother to look, right? Because there's also issues we'll get into later with Jody's defense attorney, who they had originally appointed, and then they left the case, and then somebody else came in, went to trial unprepared. So there was never a real defense investigation on this case to get us there. So, like, with all those avenues open, it's like literally like you're going to hear next week, the first door that I knocked on, the first door that I read the case file, like, that doesn't seem right. Go find this person, knock on their door, and it's like, there it is. Wow. It was that easy. It was that easy. And it also gets very frustrating. The reason I'm angry about this, like, more so than normal, is it was this easy, and there was just never an investigation get done. It was just like Damian Eccles. I don't know if it was because there was some beef with Jody, and because it almost feels like a frame job. And as much as those conspiracy theories get thrown around, I don't usually it's me going, it's not a frame job. It just was a bad job. Right. It was just about closing. Like, it almost, in these next couple of weeks, you're going to see this almost feels like they intentionally framed Jody Hill for this.
Wow.
Like there was a concerted effort from what I'm seeing in the file. It feels to me like there was a concerted effort to convict Jody Hill of something that they absolutely knew that Jody had nothing to do with, which I don't there's got to be more to it than that. So we got more to go. But anyway, I lost track of where I was even going with any of that stuff, but or where it started really is what I lost track of. But in any case, make sure you tune in on Sunday. What was the question?
I don't even know where we started.
Where we started was the question about evidence and just the messiness of having this evidence, going back to the question of, like, what's exculpatory? Where in the process can you introduce this evidence? Where in the process can you figure out, okay, this is a due process violation. Okay, this is a possible Brady violation. Okay, this is the court that needs to hear this. And that's something that many of us who, follow Adnan's case very closely can understand, because, here we have one court deciding that, no, this was already adjudicated on, like all the information was there, so this doesn't count. But we think that this alibi should have been checked out. And then a different court saying, well, actually, the alibi was already adjudicated and that doesn't count. You can't bring that up here. But the cell phone evidence was important. So you have different parties in different processes of the legal system making these different determinations. And so I understand how you're already concerned about like where this stuff will fit in to get the fastest result possible. And hopefully, an integrity unit is going to be doing that too.
The saving grace in this is evidently there's now a state agency conviction integrity unit looking into it. And so if they decide Jody Hill is actually innocent, then a lot of the hurdles that you would typically have to get over will disappear, because you won't be fighting against the state. You'll be, they'll be pushing the ball forward themselves. So, and that's hope. And again, we have the new prosecutor that I haven't spoken to yet, that hopefully is willing to look at the case objectively, and because it doesn't take much. And that's kind of where I was going with this, is like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what happened here, as far as Jody Hill is concerned.
Yeah,
like there's like very clearly Jody Hill was somewhere else when this murder happened. Very clearly, that's the case, and it seems pretty clear how they ended up getting convicted anyway. So. We'll just have to wait and see what's going on with it. I'm going to keep trying to get a hold of the conviction integrity unit. I'm going to try to set up a meeting with the prosecutor, because this needs to move quick. Jody needs to get out of there.
All right. Well, Jenna posted something again in just kind of the clarification mode, that had the question, because in this episode you had mentioned that there were some discrepancies with timing that sort of seemed like a bit of maybe head scratchers. And for Jenna, that triggered the conversations that sometimes you and Zach have about being in an area of Michigan where time zones change and there's some confusion there. So could there be a situation where somehow being right at the line of it's this time here, but it's this time here, if that could have anything to do with those time discrepancies?
Yeah, it's a good question, but no, that's where I live now. I live right down on the border of Michigan and Indiana, and that's where those time differences are. The entire state of Michigan is in Eastern time, and Benton Harbor's is 25 miles north of the state line. So that's not an issue anywhere around the Benton Harbor area. Like down, if people live down in Niles or New Buffalo or some of these border cities down on the southwest corner of the state, that's where it becomes an issue. But no, that wouldn't be an issue up there.
Gotcha. Margaret asks, are Benton Harbor and Benton Heights in the same county and policed by the same department?
I believe Benton Heights is policed by the Benton Township Police Department. They're right next to each other. There's the city of Benton Harbor is just that 4.7 square miles. Benton Heights, like if you were there, you may not even realize you're not in the city of Benton Harbor anymore. It's just it's a couple miles away. It's not very far away.
Yeah, it's Benton Township.
Okay. A lot of people wanted to know sorry, Erica. A lot of people were hoping that you could dig a little bit deeper into your past dealings with this department and with this specific person in authority. Just wanted to shout out Christy and Emily, Veronica. People are sort of wondering, like, do you want to get into that? Is that appropriate right now? Is there more detail you could share on that?
There's not a lot there. I had limited dealings with McGinnis, so we were chiefs at the same time. The Benton Harbor Police Department became the Benton Harbor Public Safety Department around the same time I took the job as fire chief up in North Berrien. which is the department I used to work for, and they're just they're right next to each other. So, and there's in our county, we do a lot of it's called automatic mutual aid, where all the different departments kind of work together. And then, there were chiefs meetings and things like that, where every month there was a chiefs association. So like we were in the same meetings doing kind of the same things. The transition from the old chief to the new chief or director. So it went from police chief to public safety director because the police and fire department joined together.
Right.
Man named Roger Lang, who I did work a lot with, was the public safety director at that point. The state emergency manager was involved then. And then Lang was ousted. And I can't get too much into it, but there was a lawsuit because of that, because he was ousted and McGinnis took over as the public safety director. I was an expert witness for the previous public safety director in that lawsuit. I don't even know how things ended up there. I mean, I do, but
right.
There's settlement type of thing that, with the lawsuit. I've probably personally met McGinnis a couple of times, been in the same room with him a few times. Most of what I know about him is just reputation stuff, so none of it's really relevant. It's just that, what people are saying about him is stuff that I've heard over the years. I've always had a perceived opinion of McGinnis prior to this, which is that's just nothing. That's just my perception based on what I heard. But I'll tell you is when I got the case file and I saw who the lead detective was, there was no part of me that was like, not Dan.
Got it. Well, don't let that create too much bias.
Nope. Everything you're going to hear from me, as always, is just fact-based, what's in the evidence.
Okay. Okay. So talking a little bit about Jody, again, knowing that we are going to get more into alibi, the question is, do we want to raise any of these questions about how far away Jody's work was from, for example, Jesse asks how long it takes to drive from work to where Mario was ultimately killed. Questions about Jody's supervisor, clocking them in and out. Is that all stuff that we should just kind of sit on for now because it'll be answered?
Yeah, I mean, Sunday's episode is covering all of that stuff in detail. As far as timing goes, where Jody worked is less than 5 minutes from the crime scene, but there was another stop in there. You're just going to need to hear the whole breakdown on Sunday. So we can have all those discussions on Sunday.
Okay, great. Well, Sarah and Kristen and Jesse, you guys are ahead of the game. We know you have those questions, just like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. I knew those were going to come up. I have them too. Very excited to hear more about that. Lauren asks, have you had any more luck in tracking down members of Mario's family since you recorded?
No, I haven't had. I mean, so essentially I've reached out through like Facebook Messenger to several of them. None of those, like nobody has like seen them, like, on Facebook, you can see if they've seen it and ignored it. They're just, I'm not friends with these people. So they end up in like the others folder. None of them show that they've been seen. I did have a student of mine that it was an old student of mine that's a mutual friend with one of them. And I asked that student if they could reach out because I'd already been in contact, because they actually have a weird connection, not a weird connection, but they have a connection to Jody too. Like Jody sent them.
Yeah, you mentioned that last week, I think.
Yeah, a JPEG.
Yeah.
And then this person like sent to me, they're like, hey, they just said that Bob Ruff is doing a podcast about them. Is this you? It was one of those. But I asked that student if they would reach out to the person they're mutual friends with, and ask them to check their other folder. And they said they would. I don't know, but it hasn't happened yet. So no, I have not been able to. It's very difficult to, especially in a community where a lot of the people in the community don't own the properties they live in. A lot of them are renters. It gets very tough to track people down. Like we've gone already on a couple of wild goose chases looking for people, because like all the resources that I use to find people, a lot of them, like if there's like a deed record, because they'll show you like, here's all the addresses for this person, and there's a bunch of them and they overlap and you don't know which is which. But then you can usually go down to like, oh, but they have a mortgage on this house, so that's where they live, and we can go there. But in this case, we don't have that. So it's been tough finding those people, but it's one of those things where, you know, we need to go make another trip to get back into the community, and talk to the people, because, you know, someone knows someone who knows someone where we can go, you know, knock on somebody's door and speak to them.
Great. Um, Charlotte says, has Leon ever said who his accomplice in the robbery actually was, or did he just take the charge solo? And were any attempts made to kind of suss the second assailant forensically or anything like that?
I'm not positive about this, because we're going to do another like full episode when we're going to dig, because there's more stuff surrounding that when we get into the trial. From memory, I don't think that Leon ever said who the second assailant was. And there was never, like you said, the gun that the second robber left in the car never got collected as evidence. They found it in Mario's closet, you know, after he was killed. So it was never looked into. But there's more stuff around the gun and everything. And look, I don't know. I haven't even asked Jody this, because when I talk to Jody, we get 10-minute conversation. So it's like, real quick, I'd love to catch up, but I need you to explain this to me real fast. You know, so
Yeah.
I haven't had much of a chance to really have a conversation, because I haven't even asked Jody if they were involved in the other robbery. They might have been. I have no idea.
Right.
Like I'm not sitting here telling you Jody. You know, Jody has a record. Jody's made mistakes in their past. I'm not sitting here telling you that Jody was a perfect angel and never did anything wrong, and this is crazy. Jody had other. You heard that they were on, you know, they were on Tether, I think, at the time, or I don't know if we've said that yet, but they
We
were.
haven't.
Sunday you'll hear that.
Okay.
They had other charges. Could have been involved in that robbery. I don't know, but what I can tell you is they didn't kill DeMario Lowe's. I know they didn't. And real quick, and Zach, were you able to find any information? Because we were talking about beforehand about Tether, if they can actually track people's location.
So here's the issue. There are different types of tether. There's active GPS tether, there's passive GPS tether, there is radio frequency tether. So there's a bunch. So we would need to know what they had.
Okay.
It sounds like the active GPS tether literally paints a map as they go,
Gotcha.
but it depends on what the person has.
Yeah. So, and the reason that comes up is because regarding the robbery, it came up when we're discussing the alibi that on the day of DeMario's murder, Jody got off of Tether. They were on Tether for a previous charge, which means on the day of the robbery, they were still on. They were wearing an ankle tracking device on the day of the murder. So I'm curious if they were able to track their location at that time. I don't know the answer.
And I feel like I remember the passive GPS tethers are the ones that like they will track you, but they don't track you in real time. You literally have to like go and have it downloaded.
Okay.
So I wonder if that, you know, I mean, it's
hard
to say.
My only experience with it at all was with Ed when Ed got out of prison for the first year. He had to be on Tether for his parole. And I just remember they like came out while I was there and set the boundary for it, for the alarm, because there was question of like they were telling him like, you make sure, because if you're supposed to be home after 8:00, you can't leave the house, and it will alarm and the police will be called immediately. And so they were literally like, where do you take your trash out to? And making sure they set the boundary out far enough that Ed could take his trash out to the curb without the tether alarming, and that he could cover every inch of his backyard mowing the grass without setting off the tether. So I don't know if it was like tracking where he was at or only making sure he was home or not home.
And we would need to see what the tethers look like in 2000, 2001, because this is a much different time too, as far as like GPS tracking and all that stuff.
Yeah. I can tell you what they didn't do based on the original murder book is make any effort to figure that shit out at the time.
This all, in my opinion, should be discussed next week and not right now.
This should all be discussed next week.
Janet told me that earlier.
Erica, if I were you, I would chop this right on out and we could talk about it next week, because you're getting ahead of yourselves.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff is going to be, people are going to be like, wait, I have to go back to the previous follow-up to hear my question about Tether answered, even though you only brought up Tether in this upcoming episode that I just listened to.
That's fine. We can leave it in because we didn't actually answer the question because we don't know.
Right. Perfect. Something about it being called Tether just really bothers me, but you might as well just call it leash. Like there's just something dehumanizing about it that I don't care for. Anyway. Okay. So, again, this sort of all of that goes. Sarah did have a question about that shotgun. So now we do know that it was found, it was recovered. in Mario's possessions. Sarah also says, did Mario ever sell anything other than drugs? The pattern of parking with an open trunk feels like he's selling something, but I wonder if it was something bulky that needed a trunk.
Don't know. Again, there wasn't an effort made to find that out. Like they made a deal at trial. At trial, they're obviously trying to convict Jody. So they tried to rule out the idea of robbery. And they're like, well, he had some jewelry and he had a little baggie of weed. So clearly he wasn't robbed. I don't know. I'm not sitting here telling you he was robbed, but for all we know, that that he went there with a stack of cash or a stack of drugs or a stack of something, guns, whatever. We don't know. They did get robbed from them. But there wasn't. This is very, very much like Damien Eccles, where you'll hear on Sunday that night, Jody's girlfriend stopped by the scene because she was in the neighborhood and was told then that everybody was already saying that Jody was responsible for the murder.
Wow.
At 2:00 in the morning, that night, so it had already been decided. And no one saw Jody do it or anything like that.
Right.
That was just like what was being said there on the scene. I don't know if it came from the cops or where it came from. But so immediately, the entire investigation was aimed at building a case against Jody. So they weren't looking for any other possibility out there.
So I think this is a good point. I got a couple things right here. One of the things that I caught during this episode when we're talking about DeMario is he seems very familiar with this address.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Miss Miles says that wasn't uncommon for him to be out there listening to music.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So he seems there's a reason he's at this address or this area.
Yeah.
The other thing that makes me believe he's very familiar with this address is when the attack occurred, he goes to go inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to ask that.
That's
Yeah.
not a thing. In my opinion, that's not a thing that happens if you're not familiar. You don't just
Correct.
You don't chance a door being locked when you're trying to escape from somebody unless you know that door is unlocked.
Yeah.
You're going for cover somewhere, but you're not going into a house that you don't know.
Yes.
Unless you're familiar with. So it makes me curious as to why he's so familiar with this building and what is going on at this area.
Well, he knew he knew Victoria. He knew Sonia downstairs. Like he had friends in the building. So yeah, and it said that he spent time there. But also, I've had reports from my investigation and other reports we're going to get into later that came way later in the report. Remember, I said in the first episode that there were reports that he was there with a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you just heard the reports this week that he was just standing out there by himself. Yeah, well, that's because there were other witnesses that said there was a group of people there when he got shot.
Wow.
That were, so there's a whole lot more to unpack.
Okay.
Right.
All right. By the way, Mo mentioned that sometimes if you open your trunk, it's because if you have a sweet speaker system that kind of helps with a boom, like you can pop your trunk and.
Right. Wouldn't a crime scene photo be handy to figure that out?
Boy, it sure would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like and our document organization team, which by the way, shout out to them. They're doing an awesome job. They're like, take the transcripts and break them down into individual testimony so I can find stuff quicker. One of them is working on trying to put together a crime scene reconstruction. They're like, I'm trying to make sense because they're reading trial testimony, which we haven't gotten into yet. I'm like, good question. Like I was so confused by it that we went there to go look at the house and the house is gone. There's not a picture of it. There's not a drawing of it. There's nothing to understand like how any of this is laid out. Well, and again, that's some stuff we'll talk about more next week when we get into next week's episode.
Well, Rebecca says sees a similarity between Richard Perry and Mario Lowe's murders in that both were or were going to be witnesses to other crimes. Is the murder of potential witnesses a common thing? And then Anna said, given the community that Mario lived in, would it be likely that he even would have testified? You mentioned in the episode that he never said, I know who these people are. Yes, use me as a resource. Yes, use me as a witness. So is that pattern there anyway that Rebecca's talking about? But it's true. Or are we just talking about an environment in which there's crime happening? And so it might just be a coincidence.
It's hard to say. It could be a coincidence because there's a lot of that stuff going on. In this case, like the idea, it doesn't make any sense to me, right? So like Leon, they knew it was Leon. They caught Leon running away from the scene. Like they knew it was him. DeMario was not going to go testify to anyone that Jody Hill was the second robber because he didn't know. And that doesn't come from what he said to the police. Like his friends being interviewed are like, he didn't know. In fact,
Okay.
there's another name that he thought might have been involved in it. It wasn't JoJo, is what they called them then. Was the name JoJo gets thrown around.
Okay, and that's information that that only you have had, because I know I've had the question. I know there's some listeners that had that question about.
Yeah, well, our own Erica Cantor and Tony both said, well, you throw out there that Mario said he didn't know who they were, but do we take that at face value, or was that something he would have just said to the cops? So now we're getting some more clarification on that.
That was to his friends being interviewed. Like they all said like he didn't know who the other gunman was, so there was no, and he didn't know Jody.
Okay,
right. So like they didn't have a relationship. Jody said like he kind of knew who DeMario was, but they didn't know each other. DeMario, as far as anyone knows, didn't know who. They couldn't have identified them even if they wanted to. So the idea that Jody was going to go murder him so that he wouldn't identify them in this robbery just doesn't jive with me.
Thank you.
Real quick, sorry, because I let that slip out, and Juliana asked in the chat. So JoJo is Jody. Yes, yeah. So that was like I mentioned earlier, like in the reports, it's Joseph, and a lot of people called Joseph JoJo. So JoJo is Jody.
Got it. Well, I know a couple of different listeners in hearing about this environment and hearing about the struggles within this environment and some of the systemic stuff that is happening. I know Tanya mentioned this, and I think you said Latoya or another listener had reached out to you elsewhere about a really great book recommendation called Ghetto Side by Jill. And I don't know if it's maybe Levy or
Leovi,
would you say Leovi? Apologies for not knowing how to pronounce that. I haven't heard it said out loud. But anyway, there's a Ghetto Side, a true story of murder in America. It's come up for a couple of different people, that it's also a great resource for kind of maybe understanding better these kinds of environments and how they're created.
Yeah. And also so one of the questions that I've seen posed from people that, particularly the people that are always trying to find me doing, something that I'm not doing right, that's that group, trying to pick apart the stuff that we talked about so far, which really is not stuff I've said. It's stuff that like Angelique and the people in the community are saying about them being, they're not being policed. They're not being protected by the police. Well, at the same time, there's like all these arrests. Everybody has records. There's all this stuff. People are getting trapped in the system. So it seems like they're over policing. I have not read Ghetto Side yet. I literally just downloaded there's an audiobook on Audible. There's also, you can get the book on Amazon as well if you want a physical copy of it. But when they wrote to me about this book, it was mentioned that one of the things they talk about in there is that there's a weird combination in communities like this of both over policing and under policing. And I wish I could articulate to you precisely what that means, but I don't understand it yet. That's why I want to read the book, and there's a question that I want to speak with some of the people from the community about, because there are all these concepts. And again, if you listen to the bonus episode from Wednesday with Andrew Collins, he talked about some of that stuff. But they're around all the time, picking people up for little drug charges and weapons charges and parole. But they get these people into the system, so there's a lot of that happening. But when somebody rolls up to your house and shoots at it, and it shoots at you and shoots at the house, there's no investigation into it. They're not taking those people off the streets. They're over policing in other senses. So I've been told this book, Ghetto Side, is a great resource to help better understand that. I'm going to be reading it. I just downloaded it. I'm in the so hopefully I'll be able to report back more on that later, but it sounds like it's a good one for everybody to check out, because that is we were talking about in the pregame that it was great. So Becky, my wife, was listening to the first episode where Angelique was talking about how, they were shooting at her son and shot the house, and her mom saw it, called the police, and the police never even came out. It's just like, if on the other side of that bridge, if someone rolled up and shot a house in Benton Harbor, the FBI would be involved. Like, they would not rest until that person was brought to justice. But on the Benton Harbor side of the bridge, it's not a priority at all. But, who knows? Maybe they made 10 other arrests that day, for other minor things, but they're not going to
Right.
look at the people where the actual real threat to people's health and safety are involved.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things that is said often about environments like this is that you're just living in a state of trauma. Like you're just constantly living in trauma, and the way that affects how kids grow up and where how you're taught from the outside what your values should be, and all of that kind of stuff comes into play. This feels like I feel like it's inevitable that you're going to have a great interview about this at some point on the podcast
Yeah,
with
I
an
hope
author
so.
or a community member. Or,
Yeah, I hope so. And there is something to, and it's another part of the history lesson is, like I said, like Jody's got a bunch of charges. A bunch of people have a bunch of charges. I have experience with a lot of people from this community from where I used to teach when I used to substitute teach years ago. And I used to spend a lot of time teaching at the juvenile detention center as well, the kids that were locked up there. And I don't remember if I shared this story on the podcast before or not, but I remember one student, it was like a residential program similar to what Richard went to down in Arizona. They don't have it anymore here in Berrien County, which is probably why he ended up in Arizona. But it's like this 9-month program they got to go through, and there's school in there. That's why I was in there teaching. And then they graduate out of it, and there was this one kid that just was doing great, just such a good kid. And I remember when he was about to graduate out, sitting talking to him and telling him, like, listen, don't come back here. Like when you go home, the way you're acting in here, go home and be that person. And he cried. Like I remember him just sitting there crying, and I remember him saying, Mr. Ruff, I can't act like this when I go home. He's from Benton
Mm.
Harbor. He's like, if I act like this when I get home, I'll get the shit beat out of me. I can't. I'm stuck there. I have to fit into that culture. I mean, these aren't the words he was using, but it was the implication he was giving. He's like, I have to be a part of that culture. Otherwise, I'm going to get beat up. I'm going to get hurt, and it was just heartbreaking. So there is this cycle there. And then I have kids like the one I mentioned earlier that was helping me to find some of the people that were related to Mario. Like we have those success stories, like students of mine that are now in their late 20s and stuff and early 30s that are out there, doing great things. They got away. Every one of them that I know of that has gone out and has really made something out of their life, they left. They left Benton Harbor, got out of there, went to a different area, a different city, a different state, and then they were able to thrive. But they were never able to thrive when they were still living in that community. It's a real thing. Just like another reason for it is I want you to understand, why everybody has a gun. Like it's easy to look back. It's easy for white guy Bob to look back and be like, what are they all doing running around with guns in there? Well, I've never lived in a community where I felt like I needed a gun to protect myself at all times. So it's different. So you can't judge people who live in an environment where they're afraid for their lives at all times. And so they're carrying weapons to protect themselves, and then look at them like they're all bad people because they're carrying guns. It's a cycle. It's a cycle that needs to be broken.
And also, we could talk about this for hours, and obviously we don't have time, but till your parents are still like Angelique is there to be
Mhm.
a parent where all you want is for your child to be far away from you because that gives them a better chance is heartbreaking. Like how hard to be a parent going, I'm in this environment because that's where I live. That's where I can afford to live. If I can even afford to live here. And I mean, that's just heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. I don't
Yeah,
even
it
know
really
what
is.
I'm saying. Just the idea, and that happens, like you said, in poor communities everywhere. Racism plays a huge role in Black communities, but also just poverty and feeling like I would rather not see my child as much because it means they're being given a better opportunity. That's just heartbreaking,
Yeah,
and
it is.
it's very real. Um, okay, so that's sort of it for like really drilling down into some of the specific questions without getting too far into conversations that we're going to have upcoming. We did get a question from Kate who sort of asking about the focus of the season in terms of dealing with Jody's case, but yes, this idea of this is a bigger problem. How can we help implement that change? Is that going to be something that is kind of itemized a little bit more in terms of calls to action, or how do you see something bigger happening through this season, and the other stories that you have been given by some of these community members, or are we just sort of saying like something has to change, but right now we need to start with Jody?
I don't know the answer to the question, because I don't, like I was kind of talking about last week, I'm not sitting here with an obvious solution in my mind that, I'm going to come in there and be some kind of savior, or we're going to come in there and just poof, fix everything. Like there's a big, long-term, deep-rooted problem in Benton Harbor. My hope is that we can be a part of that change. And I think that a big part of it is a change in leadership, and whether that means a change in mindset of the leadership, or if it means an actual change in the people that are in leadership. But that, like I had said before, when Angelique told me there's no community here, like there's not a relationship with the police, nobody trusts them. I said, well, like one of the people that I talked to on the street, one of the first things they said to me was fuck the police. They're not going to do anything. That's what that's what they said to me. But they were happy to talk to me, but they're not going to talk to them, because so like that. I think step one is to fix that relationship. Like they've got to fix that relationship so that people can start having some faith in the police department, having some trust and community with the police department. And I hope that we can be a part of that. Like I meant what I said at the end of the episode on Sunday, that like I'm willing to work with whoever. We are willing to work with whoever. It can be Director Dan McGinnis, or it can be his replacement. But I can tell you this, I'm not going away leaving things the way they are now. So either you fix it or get the hell out of the way and let somebody else fix it.
Well, I think maybe we should stop there and set ourselves up for next week.
Yeah. You know what, Erica? Right after I said that, they'll just put the music in.
Yeah, we don't need to say bye.
Yeah, that'll be the end of it. I'm going to end on my recording right there.
Okay, great.
Good job, Bob.
Oh, hopefully, they don't have any more questions.
No,
I told you.
There's
No,
a
I
lot
said.
more, but
I said that. Yeah, I mean, we have a couple like Caroline is interested in the cover art for the season, and Richard wanted to clarify how Jody spells their name, but I felt like some of those could be answered on the follow-ups. I mean, on the actual Facebook page.
Yeah, I did see somebody had. I mean, we're done recording for this, so we can do another follow-up.
Well, yeah, those are also things like I said that are more perennial that we can address later.
About the logo. So what the logo says, that's something that Jody had like made a card.
Whoops, sorry.
Like with a picture of them, and then had drawn that little. Like I pulled that for like Jody drew that.
Yeah.
And what it says is la di da, because Jody in prison, like Jody's name is Jody. But in prison, a lot of people refer to them as da or la di da. It sounds like there's like this evolution of like la di da becomes da, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's because people are looking at like, does that say Jody? What
Right.
it says is la di da on it.
Got it. Well, we can talk about that in an upcoming follow-up.
Yeah, but
I should have. Maybe we can start with that. I'll make a note to myself. Maybe we can start with that next week.
I'm going to try to keep these questions. I'm going to delete the questions we asked and keep the rest of these questions in the banners.
In case we use them next week.
Yeah.
Great.
Good news, everybody. Turns out the plumbing issue was fixed. It was a face wiping cloth that my daughter
we're not
flushed
supposed
down
to
the
flush those
toilet
anymore.
Instead of putting into, especially if you have a septic system and a ejection pump.
I need to go have a plumbing issue.
That's what we say.
Yeah.
We don't say that. We don't say that.
You don't say it.
Oh, we don't?
Yeah.
I thought we did. I thought this is anything.
Oh, all right.
I don't know what I just deleted.
Well, I think we can go ahead and end this thing. I'm going to record. I think we talked about in the pregame for you guys watching now. I have my daughter's graduation parties this weekend, so we're trying to get everything wrapped up by Thursday so that we can be setting up for.
I'm going to try to not drink too much at her graduation party.
Don't get overserved by yourself to yourself.
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
Michelle seems really drunk. I didn't think she's that drunk. Like, wait, what happened? What happened?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so we're gonna end this stream.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. We love you guys.
love you.
Good day.
Thanks, everybody.